shop started in 1906, so we've been going now for 105 years.
We used to say it beats working, that's what we used to say, but of course it's a bit hard work now.
As a kid at like 14, it was like this kind of forbidden world. My mum and dad would say I've wasted most of my life in record shops, but for me, that was my education.
I used to go there every Saturday morning as soon as I got my pocket money. They became, meeting places, almost like community centres, really.
My first sale was probably about 60 years ago, and it's all I've ever done in my life. My life has been devoted to music.
Working in Selector Disc at that time in Nottingham meant that you were almost a sort of local celebrity.
I just remember it being like an ocean of organised old records.
There's a real DNA. It's really difficult to describe. It's not just the smell of the records, but it's just generally the quirkiness of the person behind the counter.
When I hit the bottom of those stairs, I just went, OK, this is where I'm going to be every weekend for the rest of my life.
Being in business this long, which is now well over 50 years, I mean, I have kids who've been with me since they were 16, and now they come back with their grandchildren.
Spillers is famed for being the oldest record shop in the world.
Music's always been the thing I've loved most, and I've only ever worked in record shops.
So I was in East Ham in a shop with a very large South Asian community, and I was getting albums that were been recorded in Sanskrit. You got any Sanskrit, mate? Well, yeah, they just passed the Gujarati.
When I was growing up at 12, 13, when I went to bed at night, I had a portable radio and I had it under my pillow, and then at the weekend I'd gone out to try and find these records, and I've still got them to this day.
We were barely out of cylinders when Mavis started. Don't ask her about the Land Army, by the way.
I was not in the Land Army.
It was the coolest shop in town, and so I was really lucky to get a Saturday job.
So when did Tony get involved in the business?
When he couldn't get a job, really.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
And I've always walked in here looking for one thing, and immediately when I walk through the door, my brain turns to mush.
Yeah, you get gratification out of giving other people pleasure from hearing music they wouldn't otherwise have heard.
I always walk out with probably about 10 or 20 different things other than I actually came in for.
Literally going at midday and come out at closing time, and it was like an education in music.
You can actually talk to someone about something you were looking for, or it's not a faceless thing like a computer screen, is it?
This is my favourite record shop because this is a whole. How many genres? I mean, this is music that I didn't grow up with. This is music that I'm discovering now.
Robert Johnson picture this. A few of them left. Back and forth, everything's gone down. The bloody house of cards, isn't it? Eh?
I think the 1950s was the first real boom in records. The rock and roll era, and Elvis Presley, certainly got people into record stores, and record collecting was a big thing.
Rock and roll 78s just sold in enormous quantities.
78s were big sellers, though, 78s. You'd buy one, you'd break one. You'd buy one, you'd break one.
Here you are, look. You don't see anything like that anymore, do you?
A gentleman came in and asked for Bill Haley, Rock Around the Clock. By the end of the week, we had to order 500 copies of it.
Rock and roll came in, and everything got better with vinyl.
This is a new dimension in sound.
We used to get loads of Americans in when they had the bass in Burton Wood. You haven't got anything by a fella called Elvis Presley, have you?
I remember we had Elvis Presley's Heartbreak Hotel, and we used to have them in boxes, singles, 25 in a box, and you would sell 6 or 7 boxes a week. Tom Jones one, the first one he did, was just not unusual, and I said, oh, that's going to be big, and it just went like mad,
1 month, my mother noticed on the EMI or HMV advance list, there was a record by a fellow called Elvis Presley. So We decided he must be a great country singer because the Americans liked him. And it came in on a Wednesday and we unpacked it. And we were standing there, just there. And my mum said, oh, here's this Elvis fella. And we put it on and it was Heartbreak Hotel. And my mother looked at me in shock. She said, we'll never sell that. It's dreadful.
The great second surge, of course, was when the Beatles came along and the Rolling Stones. I mean, the 60s was just a fantastic era for music, and it's where record sales really started taking off.
My parents had a retail shop. Where I came into it was, I think, probably my first visit to the Cavern. 1962, a lunchtime session, the Beatles were playing. And during one of the breaks, Bob Wooler played Please Please Me, which was going to be the second single. And I thought, this is fantastic. So I went home, said to my mum, you've got to get 50 of that. She's gone, 50? No way. And I've got to say, yeah, you need it. It is going to sell. The Beatles are going to be massive.
The Beatles were fantastic, of course. There again, boxes and boxes and boxes,
Yeah. We couldn't believe a gang of boys who used to come in the shop could become so famous.
3,000 screaming teenagers are at New York's Kennedy Airport to greet, you guessed it, the Beatles.
At that point, a lot of music retailers were people who also sold, record players and radios and even white goods. And so it was only the sort of start of the late 60s and early 70s that the independent record shop started establishing itself as the place that we go to buy records.
Couldn't get a job, I wasn't hip enough or old enough to get a Saturday job in the record shop, so I got a job in the hardware shop weighing out screws and selling people wallpaper so that I more or less spent all the money I had downstairs in the record shop. It was brilliant. It smelled of vinyl.
And record shops were the place when we were kids, when we were school kids, that you all collected after school. And I'm going back to the days when there were listening booths and you'd all cram into a listening booth to hear the top 10 or whatever they'd play until they kicked you out.
We used to have my lunch hour on a Saturday sitting in the listening booth and they put on a record for me and they put on Bob Dylan's greatest hits and I was hooked. I was about 14.
I'm the archetypal kid that used to save up his pocket money and go to Oldham at a weekend, order the record that you were going to get. You couldn't just pick it up and walk home with it, you had to order it a lot of the time. And that was me, that was a big part of my culture really as a working class kid.
Yeah, the 1970s were a great, time for music. We'd come out of the 60s, heavy rock and progressive rock were the things that were taking off. But things really mushroomed with the rise of punk rock. Suddenly, any band could make a record. Anybody could make a record in their room. Big major labels became unfashionable as everybody wanted to be part of the independent trend. And many of the great record shops we still have today, started off during this period.
We started off as a second-hand store, but we pretty soon moved into new stuff, largely because it was just obviously at the time of the punk boom.
A friend and I, who were running a mobile disco together at the time, decided it'd be good to open a shop selling old second-hand records and new records side by side, so you could get David Bowie pin-ups for £2.80 new, £1.80 in quite good condition, or 90 pence in poor condition. And that was the original concept of how we first set up our own shops, just selling new and second-hand side by side. And as far as I know, we were the first people to do it that way.
Acorn Music came about because two guys couldn't really decide what they wanted to be when they grew up. And one of us, I don't recall how it came out, said, well, we could start a record shop.
Well, Jeff Travis started it in, I think, 1976. He graduated from Cambridge and he went on a record buying spree in America, bought boxes of records, didn't know what to do with them, so he thought he'd open a shop.
John Clare started the shop up around the corner in Goulburn Road in 1974. For a bit of a laugh, Jeff had told him this lease was coming up and he was leaving it, and John thought, well, maybe sell records on the weekend.
That would coincided with punk rock, and so he started selling punk rock, and then he started doing distribution as well.
We get the van coming around from Rough Trade in the guise of the local distributor Red Rhino. Would be selling us punk singles, new wave, and we were soon the city's key indie store.
A career in electronics wasn't for me. and started an independent record shop with my brother.
And you opened that in what year?
The early 70s, and we just started with one in Formby Village, then went to Crosby, bought one in Southport, and eventually Ormskirk, and they were tremendous years.
I started working HMV in the early 1980s, and it was just the most fabulous time. It was what's known as the golden period of music retailing.
In those days, you had to know a lot about music to work in a record shop, especially kind of an independent one.
Everybody would come into Selects Disc and buy their records, talk about records, bands would come in, you'd go and see the bands play in the clubs.
You're always kind of making charts and compilations for each other, and you're always discussing, what's better. Ashbury Dukes or, I don't know, Elvis Costello.
Great records being made, great times. At that age, what more do you want?
There were 3 record stores on the same street in a small village where I was, and we were cutting each other's throat,
In the majors, that was the time of huge excesses at the major record companies and corporate jets and all that kind of stuff. So they were making tons of money and able to throw tons of money at everything.
We invested money, we spent money as if, tomorrow was, never going to happen, and, we just lived for the day.
For those days, you had all the age of sales forces and buying teams and all that stuff, so it was a very expensive game.
Record companies themselves were just sloshing in money. They were making so much money. It was a fantastic period for them. But instead of investing it in bands and long-term future, they spent the money on the game of hype.
I became a rep, and I had to actually sell records into record shops. You don't really have to sell records into record shops, they sell themselves. So, and there was no target meetings or pressure or anything. You just went in and sold records. In fact, our job was to hype the charts, as we all know.
One day we got a phone call from Gallup, and they took over the running of the chart, and they said, would you like one of our machines so that we can compile the charts using your sales figures?
A rep's job, to put it bluntly, was to get as many numbers through a machine by hook or by crook as possible.
First thing on Monday morning, there'd be a queue of reps all bringing in a pile of this week's new releases.
A rep called up who we'd never seen before. He said, I understand you may be contributing to the charts. So I said, well, yes, we are actually. He said, right, can I give you these singles?
There must have been 200 or 300 people out there every week going to various record shops, trying to get their records hyped up the charts by getting extra sales through these machines.
I said, well, how much are they going to be? And he said, oh, nothing, you just sell them for 50 pence and what you get is yours. Just make sure you put the numbers in this machine.
In the early days, it was a book, you wrote down the numbers, and they would sit for 20 minutes writing numbers into books, and for that, they would give you a pile of albums, and no shop's going to say no to that.
We'd get a package of about 8 or 10 records through the post that we hadn't ordered. And then within a few days, somebody with a southern accent, who were never Scousers, would come in and say, can I have 3 copies of it? So they thought we were a chart shop, but we weren't. Ooh, what was that?
There was a time when I was repping in the 80s where I don't think I sold any records from week to week. I just gave them all away because that's the way that you got the records discounted in the store. And as everyone else was giving all their records away, you had to give all your records away as well. So there were some shops that didn't buy any records at all.
They obviously did it for shops that were chart shops.
But did you never have the heart to tell them if they were wasting their time?
No,
you were not a chart shop.
No, because they were buying back records we'd never even paid for. So.
100% profits.
But the one thing I will say, a lot of people's careers started off with their first or second single being hyped, and that went on to booster a huge career for people.
Well, the record companies did everything legitimately. It's the employees of that company that did everything underhand.
And it happens in every country in the world, the hyping. I mean, America, you had huge court cases over companies buying time on air. And it was the same in the UK, only they bought it in the record shops, because if they could get a record going shooting into the chart at, say, number 22, all of a sudden, in these days, Woolies were very big. They would come in with a massive order because this record came into 22, and then radio stations would say, oh well, if the public's buying it, we must have it on the playlist.
And the 80s and probably early 90s were the golden age of record retailing. When did you first notice things beginning to go wrong?
Oh, well, I mean, if you talk through the 80s and 90s, nobody realised anything was going wrong. It was, we thought, great, this was going to go on forever. Towards the end of the 90s, we still had a major sort of feeling that everything was going to be fine, but there have been pointers all along the way. Garages selling music, supermarkets beginning to sell music. If you look back at the history of why record stores started to decline, it was death by 100 cuts. The first major mistake they made was trying to get rid of vinyl to accommodate the CD.
Do you think the music industry made a mistake in trying to kill off vinyl?
Yes, I do, definitely. I know certain companies wanted to get rid of music enthusiasts and specialists and go into sort of mainstream discount and chart product. I think it was a major mistake there, definitely.
It took a few years, but vinyl suddenly vanished and nobody wanted to talk about it. I had 2,500 styli. Record needles sat in the shelf, which I eventually put in the bin. I wish I'd kept them.
I mean, how did you feel at that point? Because when I look at that, 1 week you've got a rep coming in trying to sell you the latest new album, telling you it's absolutely fantastic. A couple of weeks later, they're coming in and telling you vinyl's finished, this is the future, and yet you must have had a shop full of vinyl and styluses.
We certainly had the shop full of vinyl, and we were very committed to it. And what sort of frightened us in a way was that Woolworths were saying, bring your vinyl and stick it in the bin, in here. And it was like they were devaluing it completely, and they were taking their lead from the record companies.
Well, I think if you go back to the 80s as well, the vinyl that we had during then was all recycled vinyl. So the actual quality of vinyl recordings had started to diminish. Vinyl itself, the records were thinner and more flimsy, and everything was designed for us to switch our music collection over to CD.
Certainly when I started in the early 80s, we would get people bringing 5 or 6 different copies back of the same album because there'd be a fault in the vinyl. The 70s vinyl seems to be fine and the 60s vinyl was fine. It's just the stuff in the 80s seemed to be really thin and not very good quality. I mean, CD had a lot of, CDs are great, the portability and all that sort of thing, but a lot of the advertising was done on the superior sound quality, which just wasn't true.
Pure sound played by laser. Just listen to that. No hisses and crackles, of course, but if you do want that, munch a biscuit, sip a cup of cocoa, and it'll sound just like your old record player. You know what I mean?
I can remember working in a shop and the industry had told everybody that CDs were unbreakable, that you could eat your dinner off them, and they would still play. I mean, I actually had a gentleman come back demanding his money back because he'd read this, and he'd eaten his dinner off him to prove a bet to his mate. He'd lost the bet and he actually wanted a refund because the CD wouldn't play after he'd eaten his dinner off it.
Companies like Woolworths knew that they could display a CD easier and in a lot smaller space than a vinyl album. And I think the record companies did a great selling job on the CD. And it was a great format, but it could have sat alongside vinyl for a lot longer than it did.
CD had a hell of a lot going for it. It's convenient, it's pretty consistent sound quality depending on whatever you're playing on it, and portable, so on. But you can't love it. You can't actually love CD. You can love the music that's on it, but you can't love the format. Whilst vinyl was a format that actually people really treasured.
When they first came out, CDs, they were like 25 quid or something ridiculous, really expensive. Yeah. And they actually cost £1.50 with exhaustive artwork and all like that. And once the general public cottoned onto that, quite rightly, me as well, as a member of the general public, is that it pissed me off. And then, like you said, they deleted vinyl and tried to engineer it. They ended up getting shot in their own foot by their own kind of deviousness, really. And just the kind of relentless pursuit of just money.
I can vividly remember a friend of mine, a customer called IG Culture, who showing me at some point in the 90s this thing that he had, which was like a little mobile phone, which was an MP3 player. And I didn't know what the hell it was. And I didn't even really clock what the significance of it was. But what he was showing me was like his record collection in something smaller than the palm of your hand. And I didn't really put it together that meant hard times were coming.
Things just sort of pre-millennium were very exciting. It's when Napster came in that things started to change a little bit, and it was really weird. Conversations in the shop changed as well. You know, Hotmail, Google, all that kind of stuff was really fresh. It was new. We were just setting up Hotmail accounts, and we were just understanding the concept of a download. And the DJs, especially a lot of the black DJs, they were quite on it because, downloading was free, and so the shops started to really feel the impact.
It was always this gradual decline of sales, and the customer who was one of your regular customers wouldn't come in as often. The DJs who used to come in 30 at a time of a weekend vanished, one by one.
Yeah, the big change came really, I think, in the 90s when people started downloading, and and at that point, the whole music industry started to change.
There have been so many years of people feeling that they're being stiff. After the great floodgates opened with Napster, people realised that they could get things for free and kind of rebel a little bit.
Culturally, everything changed. And, from hearing a song on the radio, thinking, oh, I like that song, I'm going to go down to Honest John's and get it, or to wherever it is, to hearing a song on the radio and downloading it onto your phone or whatever it is, that just happened very quickly. And so, of course, places that were selling physical, stuff, it was butchery, really.
Music was the first to have to work out how to deal with it. And so there was no example and no roadmap and nobody that you could sort of learn from their mistakes, because actually music was the first, so music inevitably probably made mistakes.
Do you think the industry handled illegal downloading well, or that they made mistakes? Because I look back and I think how that they tried to shut down everybody who was illegally downloading and then suing them instead of embracing what was a new concept. Did you think the industry was scared of downloading?
The industry was ignorant, basically. By that time, we had the industry run by accountants, lawyers, but they weren't music people. And this was a big problem.
Record labels started to change, that the relationship between artists and record labels changed, and the relationship between record labels and the consumer changed.
What the internet did was kind of disconnect us from our regular DJs. That's when we began to feel the flow. And you kind of feel it, not just, it's a human thing. It's really weird. It's like when less people come into your store and more people phone. That's when we began to feel the distance from our customers.
I think what happens when the digital age started and record companies, had to completely rethink the playing field is that they want to get their product now into the most visible spaces. So they're putting CDs into supermarkets because that's where people do their shopping, and they might grab the new Adele album or something like that.
Independent record shops were really important to record companies because it was they who compiled the chart. What happened when supermarkets were allowed to contribute to the chart was record companies realised the power of a supermarket could get a record to #1 on their own.
Supermarkets essentially are so big, they do what they want. You couldn't say, well, we've thought about it and we actually don't want you to get into music. The record companies couldn't do that because actually that's illegal. You have to trade with somebody who's offering you the money to sell your stuff.
I think the problem was the supermarkets got in was that they began to drive the price down.
I have been known to go and buy it off a supermarket so that we could sell it at the same price just to compete with them.
Whatever price you sold your music for, they would sell that music for less than they bought it from the record label.
I was paying $6.99 down at the supermarket and it cost me £8 excluding VAT from the company.
Supermarkets do tend to use our product as a loss leader, which is quite dangerous and has been the result of companies like Xavier and Woolworths not being with us anymore.
It was a bit of a physical inevitability that they were going to do what they did, and that had an impact right away across retail.
They say that we pay the same price that they pay.
So you just want truth, really?
Yeah, clearly they don't.
Yeah, okay.
What the major labels do is they print high so they can just sell a lot of the same stuff through the very obvious channels. And I think, of course they'll give stuff to independent markets because they want fingers in the pies, but I think what they're more interested in doing is getting a lot of stock into the main stores and the chain stores, which includes supermarkets, it includes HMV.
A lot of retail chains made the mistake of trying to compete with supermarkets on price, as opposed to on range and quality.
It was record shops that didn't start adapting and still relied on the major record companies to look after them. Well, those days of support had gone, and those who didn't diverse soon started closing.
A lot of the record companies have been ignoring the independent sector for the last number of years, and to be honest with you, I think a few of them would like to see the back of us. It was okay when we were hiking the charts for them and doing all the jiggery pokery that was going on. They used us, but then when we outlived our use, we get dropped like a bag of stones. Nowadays, the supermarkets, they've had their fill of music. They've done their damage, and that damage has cost a lot of jobs, to be honest with you.
Well, by 2003, I'd really begin to notice that my own sales were going down a little bit. A lot of my customers were closing down. And I'd actually got to the point where I'd be going into record shops and I wouldn't be saying, how's it going anymore? Because the record shop owner would then spend half an hour pouring out their woes of how difficult it is, how tough it is. And then, of course, at the end of it, I would have to say, well, not to worry, we've got this fantastic new CD this week that you'll sell bucket loads of. It really began to concern me because a lot of the businesses were great businesses, are long established, and I had customers sort of losing their homes and just good, reliable businesses closing down. And it got me worrying about the future of independent record stores.
You had it all. A lot of the stores around the country were falling, and it just got to a stage where it was just way too difficult, and I was just pretty much putting everything back in, and I just thought, enough's enough. And I wasn't alone.
I think the record companies overreacted completely because they had the wrong people in place who didn't see a bigger picture.
We grew up listening to albums, and now kids can pick and choose and cherry pick and download odd bits and pieces. And also kids' impression is that music's kind of free, really.
I've seen a lot of record shops go. I've seen very few new ones open.
I think there is a real challenge there for retail shops to survive.
Digital downloads have taken over. That's taken several tens of thousands of turnover away from us.
We are a dying breed. There's no two ways about that. Technology will decree that.
It's a harder time for all record shops. I can't say anyone's having an easier time of it now than they were before the downloading boom. But we've got to adapt and survive, basically.
Because people stopped buying vinyl and CDs are not as popular as they were a few years ago. So what else can you do? You can't have a shop selling MP3s.
In this particular area, there used to be a shop in Barnsley that shut about 10 years ago. One in Rotherham that shut about 5 years ago. Then there was another shop in Retford which shut a couple of years ago. But the next decent record shop that you're going to find heading east from here will be in Amsterdam, which is a sobering thought.
The biggest problem, of course, these days is that the profit margins are relatively small, and the expenses are quite huge, and that does inevitably take people out of the trade. And yes, we have seen many larger stores, small and large stores, come and go.
Will we just disappear into the crack in the wall or something? Or,
Will we become a novelty shop and people will come and say, oh, remember when they used to buy records and things like that? I don't know.
A museum.
A museum.
Yeah, I think people will come and look at us, or look at him. I'll be playing my record player up in the sky.
I'm going to get you stuffed and put you in the corner.
Well, there's a little thing. I was only playing for somebody early on who was asking about music to do with poultry, of all things.
Poultry?
Yeah, as in like chickens, etc. And this guy sings this song called Chicken Rhythm, and he makes it sound like the F word, but he doesn't actually ever say the F word. See if I can pick up on it for you. Something like this. So after a nice little... He'll come in with his bit now. He's a scat singer called Slim Gaylord. See if we can find him doing his bit though. But he never actually says the words, you know, it's there for you to say, yes he did. He doesn't. No. We actually have a friend and butcher who comes in whose name's Dave, and he would love this record because he's into chickens and all kinds of stuff, you know.
There's been a lot of doom mongers who said record shops are finished. What do you say to that?
It's just bullshit. And that's been said for 30 years. The record industry's over, it's finished, it's done, it's dusted. And it isn't. Look at the shop.
We have the ability as an independent to change with the marketplace.
I think every independent shop has had a good long look at what they do and has weeded out a lot of the things that just don't sell anymore.
We sell music, and we sell good music.
Every record's got a little review on it.
We've got a big ticket agency here.
If it's musical, then we'll consider stocking it.
We've got tickets for probably about 200 gigs at any given time.
We use the internet through Twitter, Facebook, our mailing list, our website to promote products and gain sales.
It's basically a one-stop shop for the whole of that sort of musical culture, really.
Our two biggest selling records just now are both by Glasgow bands.
In the year that we've been open, we've had at least 40 different bands play.
That's what the music business is, it's constantly changing.
You know, to have done this film and to gone out on the road and see a lot of these shops again and see how they've diversed, you know, that they're all stocking, you know, more country, folk and jazz and blues and metal and most of all vinyl. I mean, so many of the shops we visit now put on bands on a regular basis, and that's supporting local music and supporting new bands and things like Record Store Day, which has just been an absolutely fantastic thing for record shops, where, you know, this year there was over 400 exclusive releases, and yeah, the record companies themselves have really got behind that, and to put out 400 exclusive pieces of vinyl that you can only get in your independent record store has got people going back into the stores.
Record Store Day it's so positive for us. It's our best day of the year, like every independent, I'm sure. It's like 10 Christmas Eves stuck together.
It's totally brought that excitement of record shops back, and gets, you know, it's just awesome to see 900 people queuing outside.
People tell me that record stores are dying and people aren't interested in music on the high street. I say let the queue do the talking.
We're in Jumbo Records and it's Record Store Day. We opened at 9 and the queue started at 5.
This year there are 400 releases by artists all over the world who feel that they owe a debt to record stores because they helped them to become the stars that they are today, and they want to pay something back.
A lot of younger people are coming in. They're asking us about decks, they're asking us about vinyl, they're asking us what they need to do to get themselves started on a vinyl collection. If you don't encourage the younger people, then our music industry will die. It will become where people think it's for free. But what we're getting is kids coming in and saying, yeah, we want to buy our music and we want to buy it in shops like this.
There seems to be this idea that a simplistic idea that record shops disappeared because people didn't want to buy vinyl, when I kind of wonder if it isn't the other way round, really, because people don't buy vinyl because the record stores disappeared.
It seems at the moment there's a vinyl revival, but for you, vinyl's just never gone away, has it?
I've always laughed at that until these last 2 years. It's always been there, it's always gone, and there's always been new faces exploring it. It makes me smile. It used to be called LPs and records. Why we all have to call it vinyl, I don't know still. Lots more youngsters in the last 2 years, yes, are buying records. And they're exploring. They're obviously looking for the obvious household names, your Floyds, your Zeppelins, etc. But they're happy to be introduced to other things. And a lot of what they're sort of talking and thinking has come from their dads. Quite often they've inherited their dad's collection.
We're getting more and more people who are young and want vinyl.
Yeah.
Where's that come from all of a sudden again?
We've found in the last 5 or 6 years that the younger generation are coming in a lot more because a lot of new bands, indie bands, are releasing stuff more and more on vinyl and download rather than CD.
And there's still sort of kids coming in, buying record players, buying their first Velvet Underground and Nico album. You know, it's just heartwarming stuff, really.
I think the future for vinyl is amazing just now. I think there's never been so much coming out. I've been doing this for 22 years now and it seems better than it's ever been.
It's ownership, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you can't make a record any other way. You've got to buy it. You can make a CD,
Yeah,
you can't make a record.
When I'm making my own music, when I make a record, I'm still thinking in vinyl terms. I'm still thinking of a side one and side two. And I think it's really important in my mind anyway. And just for the whole kind of sequencing of a record, you know, and I think about the break it takes between listening to side one and flipping the record over.
I just don't think that you can buy anything that sort of means as much as a record for me, personally. I just think it must be because people want to own an artefact. And the whole ceremony of putting a record on, I personally really enjoy.
The experience that I've had with the younger people that I know, fans and my kids and mates and stuff, is that vinyl's this like amazing version of the CD. It looks better, it's nicer to own. You know, like some people that I know in Portland say, like, you know, they grew up with their Elliott Smith CDs. The vinyl, they treasure it, and it's like a deluxe version of this crappy little thing.
Certainly, the last couple of years, you know, things have really, really improved. I think for one, record companies themselves have realised that record shops are important. You know, they're so important in breaking new acts, so that they've been giving record stores much better deals now that is enabling them to compete, you know, virtually on a level playing field. Because vinyl's doing so well, I feel it's the future for independent record stores. So now, instead of feeling that the record store was about to die, I'm full of hope for the future.
And how do you see the future for independent record stores?
I think the best record stores will still be here in a long time. The people who live and breathe it, but also know how to run a business as well, will be here long after the last chain is gone, long after the supermarkets have given up. You know, we're kind of, in a way, very much like the original record shops when they were small, and that's where you went. And I think we'll be the last ones here.
I think the problem for independent stores is it's difficult to replicate yourself because it's so much down to the person behind the counter and the personal relationship between the customer and the person running the shop. We want a myriad of young music fan entrepreneurs all around the world, each opening up one shop.
You know, all I'm looking for when I come here and I chat to Tom and Derek and all the guys is just interesting records. That are going to sound really great on the radio.
But we feel that there's a whole market out there of people who want to come to shops, who want to come out and spend money with us.
We do have a future. It's difficult. It is really difficult because we're getting less and less product being made by record companies, and that product is selling less and less, so we have to find more and more things to sell.
Ultimately, people are buying less physical products, and that will continue to happen. So it becomes more niche, it becomes about margin, it becomes about service.
I think the people who are passionate about music really like the fact that there's independent record shops with people in there who know what they're talking about and will point them in the direction of music they'll like rather than just trying to second guess it on the internet.
There are ways in. You need a physical record shop full of people who are going to help you and guide you so that you can understand this.
You get a mad variety of stuff. You get the vinyl that you just can't find anywhere else for vinyl fans anyway. And it's kind of, they're community hubs, really. Any record store, it gets its regular customers coming and going, and you build yourself into something that's more of a community. It's not just about buying a product.
Rather than have a few thousand items we sell a lot of, we've now got 25,000 items that we sell a little of.
The old model was on Monday morning you come, you get your master bags out, you phone the 5 distributors and you get the stuff on Tuesday and then you sell it for the rest of the week. Well, it's not like that anymore.
We have to ask ourselves who's going to dictate our music taste of the future, the checkout girl, the supermarket or the record shop? Only one answer for me.
You're emailing people in Australia, you got guys in Seattle, you've got a label in Montreal, you're getting 50 copies from France of this Afrobeat LP.
I want records that when I play them on Six Music, somebody goes, that sounds good.
Shops like these, and thank God, there's still some around where you can come and be recommended music and just browse and and pick stuff out you might not even heard of or thought of before.
I think the ones that are here now are going to be here for a long while, and I don't see why they shouldn't be. We had, there was 18 stores opened up in the last 2 years.
Record shops kept me going through those years when I was desperately trying to work out how to be an international rock star, But I've tried in my own way to support them.
We look out for each other. We all know there's not many of us left, and we've come to the point now where we realise that our core is our strength now.
It's more than just making a living. It's a calling. It's something we're almost driven to do, and we feel a deep responsibility of doing the job right.
Even though everything's supposedly accessible on a computer at the end of your fingertips, nothing beats the buzz of meeting somebody face to face across the counter and saying, "Hey, have you heard this?"
You can't underestimate what it is when a human being who's knowledgeable about music says to you, "Try this."
You've got different kind of market of people that are going to go into independent stores that aren't going to go into the chain stores purely on a sort of, ethical basis, if you like.
The retail landscape has completely changed, but within that you've got these independent record stores that are providing something for the real music aficionado that nobody else can provide.
We will continue to do what we've always done that we do best, and that's be incredibly good with our customers. We'll spend half an hour with a customer to make 2 or 3 quid.
Liz was telling me a few weeks ago, like a couple of American guys came in and just pretty much cleaned out all the stuff that other people would be interested in, and a lot of other people would be maybe ecstatic about that. But I think he was like, "Oh no, it's like cleaning out of all my good stuff." I really like that. It's got a good sort of good spirit of like. It's not just a shop, really.
There's so much focus on independent stores at the moment, so much interest, that doesn't come from nowhere. People actually do want somewhere that they can go and find something that they didn't know they wanted. The next thing I'm going to do is buy that album over there.
It's just not just a shop. There's something else going on. It's like a resource, I think, for people. It's like a library for your ears and your mind,
People do tend to forget that their local record shops exist and need their patronage to actually survive.
To have a shop that sells music, and not just music, you see musical instruments and the paraphernalia of music, encourages people in that town to be into music. So to support a place like this I think is very, very important for our local musical culture, for our bringing kids through, encouraging people to play music, not just to listen to music.
There's been quite a few shops that have closed down recently, and there's always, I didn't know this place was closing down. It's a real shame, but it's like, when were you last there? That's why they're closing. So basically we just need lots of people coming up and supporting their local record shop.
It's all about spirit and love and culture and passion and the lack of rationality, if you like. We're not trying to sell people what they want, we're trying to sell people what they don't know they want yet.
Difference is now that I think the genuine music lover and the music fan appreciates what the record shop has done for them. And so whenever possible, wherever possible, they, as you say, make an effort to give back because they realise that it's needed, the help is needed. If I've got some spare money, I will go and buy an album that I really have enjoyed, even if I've got it digitally on vinyl, because I still love to have that tangible, beautiful item in my hand.
No, I'm not denouncing the digital age, it's brilliant, and embrace it and work, you know, as a musician, I always say, embrace that technology. But just, you know, you can't, there's some things you can't replace, really. There's some experiences that you cannot, if you've never been to a record shop and bought a record on vinyl and gone home and played it on your record player, and your dad's not shouting upstairs saying, turn it down, you've not lived. If you've not done that, you've not lived, you've not been alive. You might think you have, but it's just all been a digital illusion.
Of another well-known track, Staying Alive. Mad, innit? Totally mad. Could make your ears bleed, couldn't it?
Well, you know that you're around people who are like you. If you're an obsessive, and if you're in there for 15, 20 minutes or an hour or two, there's probably an unspoken kind of code between people that you've all got that same affliction, slash passion.
Yeah, I think passion's the right word.
That's the one.
And then it's about, you know, those shops that have character, that have kudos, that have long-standing, but who are welcoming and who are going to welcome in new generations of record buyers. The people who walk into a place like this and go, this looks incredible, but I don't know where to start. Do what I did. You go up the back there, ask the guys, they will tell you everything you need to know.
Well, this is a fantastic place to come, having coffee and pies. It's made it a place that people say, I'll meet you down the record store.
We're about 6 months old now. We're learning it as we go along. You know, I've learned a hell of a lot about selling records, being part of the whole record chain, the record industry. The interest is there, obviously, because of the concept. But, you know, I still believe it's because we're a record shop. Maybe the dream is to open another one and then we see where we go from there. Baby steps, but with big ideas.